Simultaneous with the major Indian thrust into East Pakistan near Jessore, a second Indian incursion took place on the opposite side of East Pakistan. An estimated 2 Indian battalions, some 1,600 men, crossed the border in this area north of Kamila. According to Pakistani officers on the scene, the Indian troops, accompanied by Mukti Bahini guerrillas, crossed the border at Kasbah. They moved up the East Pakistan railway tracks that run parallel to the Indian frontier. The incursion took place late Saturday night. Foreign newsmen in Dhaka were taken to Kasbah by Pakistani army officers 4 days later. The Pakistanis brought them to the scene of the battle in order to disprove claims by India that Indian troops had never set foot on Pakistani soil. When the newsmen arrived, officers described for them what sounded like a rout. The officer commanding forces in the area of the attack said one of the 2 Indian battalions was cut to pieces. The second was pushed back and badly mauled. Indian casualties were heavy. The Pakistanis say they recovered 60 bodies. Several could still be seen when newsmen arrived at Akora Junction near the scene of the battle. The Pakistanis said the Indian death toll must have reached several hundred soldiers, but that the Indians had been able to recover most of the bodies. The railway junction was one of the targets of the attack. The Indians subjected it to heavy shelling, apparently in an effort to prevent reinforcements from being moved up. The ultimate objective, the Pakistanis believe, was to cut the vital main road that runs up the eastern side of East Pakistan close to the Indian border. Capture of this road would give the Indians and the Mukti Bahini guerrillas they support control of the main communications axis in the eastern part of East Pakistan. Since Sunday, when the attack was repulsed, the area has been quiet. The Indian attack was obviously timed to coincide with the major push toward Jessore on the other side of East Pakistan. It appeared to observers here that the Indian Prime Minister, Mrs. Gandhi, had given in to pressure from the hawks in her cabinet and decided to test Pakistani defenses with several major incursions. If a foothold had been gained, a rebel Bengali government might have been set up in the captured area. Both attacks apparently failed. The Pakistanis are now waiting to see whether the Indians will go back to their previous tactic of shelling across the border or whether they will now attempt something bigger. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Kasbah, East Pakistan.
The disturbance is confined to 2 of the 5 housing wings and the auditorium. An estimated 500 to 600 inmates are in the 2 wings, including the auditorium where the disturbance is located. At the present time, authorities are still evaluating the situation to determine a desirable course of action. The state police are standing by along with a force of correction officers from other institutions.
Where's the warden? He's on the stairs here. About 200 people now. How many other people do you have? 5. What? The warden's all right. The warden's all right. Who's injured? The warden. How bad are his injuries? He needs to see a doctor. How bad are his injuries? He needs to see a doctor, that's all.
That's it, right there. Right there, right there. That's it, right there. Right there. Push me, David.
One of the things they pointed out that they felt that they were not being treated with dignity as blacks. They were being harassed, that racism was an inherent part of the institution, that the medical treatment was bad. They had one doctor for 1,200 men, that the food was bad and oftentimes not served on time.
By late afternoon, still a standoff. The prisoners still controlling 2 cell blocks and 6 hostages. The authorities still negotiating, or so they say. No solution in sight, and you can still hear the defiant calls from the prisoners inside the walls. Robert Shackney, CBS News at Rahway State Prison, New Jersey.
36 passengers got off the jetliner in Seattle last night. Left aboard 4 crew members and the hijacker, dressed in a business suit, demanding $200,000 and carrying a plain briefcase which he told the crew held explosives. With the full ransom collected from Seattle banks and 4 parachutes aboard, the plane headed for Reno. It took 3.5 hours, slow for a jet, but the hijacker had given detailed flight instructions. The rear stairwell was open all the way. It arrived at Reno in shreds. The crew, here being debriefed by the FBI, was told to fly low over Oregon's flatlands with the flaps down. The speed dropped to 200 miles per hour. Somewhere, the hijacker parachuted away with the money. The crew had little to say.
We gave the information to the authorities, and we just don't want to discuss it any further.
Have you been told by the FBI not to discuss?
No, they handle their investigation, and my company would rather have it released through them.
Tina, were you with the rest of the crew during the flight after you left the ground the last time?
Yes, I went up to the cockpit.
None of you were within sight of the hijacker, right?
Right. We already talked about it, and the captain, filled in.
How did you surmise that he was not on the plane when he landed in Reno?
Well, a search was made of the plane immediately after landing.
As we understood it, he could have gotten off as the plane taxied before it came up here. How did the crew know he wasn't on when it touched ground?
No way. The crew couldn't know that, but we had the airport covered.
Are the authorities now searching for the man?
Snow covers the mountains in Northern California and Nevada, a hostile terrain for any parachute drop, especially at night. Police believe he left the 727 in the flatlands of Oregon or Washington, but they are still looking in 4 states, even around the airport. Authorities began their search here, thinking the hijacker may have jumped off at the end of the runway as the plane touched down. But the problem is more complex. A daring parachute escape from a flying 727 somewhere between Reno and Seattle, Washington. Bill Curtis, CBS News, Reno, Nevada.
To his friends, John Sexton is a hero, and on Thanksgiving Day, neighbors come bearing gifts. But after 26 months as a Viet Cong prisoner, America is still unreal to John Sexton.
You're actually taken from one environment of years before, and then, just you're used to that environment and the things that have happened in that, environment, and then you're completely tossed right into a new environment and a new way of life.
As friends and family gathered to give a special thanks today, private thoughts kept running through the minds of John, his mother, and his dad.
Every time that a holiday would come around, my appetite would be very poor because I would think of them eating rice and not having proper food. Many times during the year, I got up from the table and walked away and go to bed at night. I couldn't sleep, thinking that he might be cold and sick.
He was the last thing I thought about at night when I went to bed. The first thing I thought about in the mornings when I got up. And that is true. And he was continuously on my mind. I worried about him. If I almost knew he was alive, and I worried about him, the condition. But I always knew he was strong. I knew he had a good head on him, and I figured that he would make it.
Oh, that was my big dream, Big Christmas, combination Christmas and Thanksgiving meal, just having everything there and knowing, just looking at a big turkey and knowing I could have all of it that I want to eat, you know. And I thought about many years before, all the years before that we had our big turkey with all the trimmings.
It was everything John Sexton dreamed of in a Thanksgiving, especially being free again. Jeff Williams, CBS News, Mount Clemens, Michigan.
New Jersey Governor William Cahill came to a nearby school and personally directed the final negotiations that led to the release of the hostages.
I want to make an announcement that I've just been informed that all of the hostages have now been freed and are safe.
What's their condition, Governor?
As far as we know, with the exception of those who have already gone to the hospital, the rest of them are well.
The approximately 500 rebellious prisoners returned to their cells following release of the hostages. Outside observers watched the return to ensure that no reprisals were taken. State officials said no serious injuries occurred during the 24-hour takeover. Prisoners sent out word that they wanted no violence and let the hostages loose in return for publication of their grievances. They said the prison provided inadequate medical care, poor educational programs, bad food, and no rehabilitation programs. They charged racism by the guards and asked for changes in the parole program. An agreement has been made to take no reprisals against the 500 to 600 prisoners who took part in the revolt. However, reports from inside the prison say they're very skeptical. Prison groups and private groups will be meeting with them later today to see if they can work on the list of demands given tonight. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Rahway State Prison.
He is small and fast and hits hard. If he hits hard enough, he may go to the Olympics next year. If he does, he will be the first convicted felon ever to represent the United States in those games. He is Bobby Lee Hunter, 21 years old, 118 pounds, an inmate at the Manning Correctional Institution near Columbia, South Carolina. Amateur boxer whose career, with gloves on, began inside this prison. You got no one teaching you, no trained boxing. How do you know what to do?
Well, I do it so long, I get used to it. I guess I know what I'm doing. You know? I don't have a trainer. I don't think I know
How do you know the moves to make, the footwork, the sequence of punches and things like that? You're just teaching yourself?
I'm teaching myself.
Hunter has watched the professionals on television, and that's about as much teaching as he gets. He has had plenty of experience brawling with his fists, both as a teenager in Charleston and here in prison. The experience, some sparring in the prison, and the workouts have given him the speed and skill to best 23 of 24 opponents in amateur bouts. South Carolina prison officials permit many inmates to take up work outside the fences and walls. Bobby has been outside for many fights, and earlier this year fought in the Pan American Games in South America. Hunter's most recent fight was November 1st. It was over in 24 seconds of the first round. He didn't lose that one, and feels no one has ever beaten him with or without gloves on.
I got in trouble messing around with a girl and got involved in stabbing a man. And got charged with voluntary manslaughter. She was sentenced in 1967. I was sentenced out here at the Manning Correctional Institution.
He has done a lot for himself, and any guy that does that, we're willing to jump on the bandwagon with him and push him. So we're willing to take him around the fight and send him where we can.
Does this, in your opinion, produce fewer returns to prison?
Oh, certainly, yeah. If a boy can grab hold of something he likes and he can make that will help him succeed, then when he gets on the street, he'll stick with it.
Do you think that if you get the parole that you hope to get in '73, that you'll be finished with that sort of thing?
Yes, I know I'll be finished with it because when I came in here young and wild, and well, now I'm a man. I take life as it comes now, near future.
When the Olympic Committee invited Bobby and later discovered that he was a member of the institution, what was their reaction?
They had some questions after he was in Miami, Florida, training. they had some questions about sending an inmate, I think as they look at it, a prisoner, out of the country representing the United States. We wrote many letters, directly made many phone calls, and we got over that hump. But they did have a lot of questions about it.
The International Committee in Switzerland is considering regulations that could keep Hunter out, but all that is up in the air. If no new rules appear, the only thing to stop him would be another fighter, and there hasn't been one yet who has done it convincingly. Jed Duval, CBS News, Columbia, South Carolina.
The Teniente copper mine, formerly owned by a U.S. company, is currently the center of an international controversy which could seriously affect relations between Chile and the United States. Chilean President Salvador Allende has recently nationalized this and other copper mines, but with the approval of the opposition-dominated Chilean Congress, the government refuses to pay indemnization. And now comes Fidel Castro to visit this mine, an avowed enemy of the United States, and a firm crusader for the expropriation of all U.S. properties, not only in Chile, but throughout all of Latin America. Chile is the world's third largest producer of copper, but the country depends on copper sales to supply 80% of its foreign exchange. Production has slightly fallen off in the country's larger mines, due partly to nationalization and partly because expansion plans have not yet fully developed. Union problems with the miners demanding a 50% wage increase has added to Chile's problems. The miners reasoned that now that the mines belong to Chile, they should receive a part of the wealth in terms of higher pay. The Allende government is desperately trying to convince the miners that a 30% hike is sufficient. But the major problem facing this socialist-oriented country is the fall in the world price of copper, a drop, ironically, due mainly to the easing of the war in Vietnam. Fidel's arrival here was greeted with an outburst of enthusiasm. These workers see in him the man who brought what they believe is a successful social revolution to Cuba, the same goal these workers want to achieve. The problems facing Chile today are the problems faced by Cuba, making its nationalized one-product economy produce more, the drop in world market prices, and the search for new markets. Thus, when Fidel talks to these workers, he can feel himself on familiar ground. Castro makes the comparison that sugar is to Cuba what copper is to Chile. Cuba expropriated U.S.-owned sugar companies, just as Chile nationalized its copper industry. Castro maintains it was the United States' violent attitude which drove Cuba into the Soviet orbit. And he has made it clear here that he expects the United States to assume the same attitude with Chile. George Nathanson, CBS News, with Fidel Castro in Chile.
This is Clifford Deeds. Mr. Deeds, a mild man normally, is pretty angry these days. He's mad at the airline industry in general and the people who operate airports in particular. He says they don't keep their promises to people. And that's why he's standing here, listening to his radio, checking up on the air traffic in and out of John F. Kennedy Airport in New York City.
Maintain 1,500, and incoming TCAN 1,500, squawk 1200.
The airline people would like to forget Mr. Deeds, but Mr. Deeds is not about to let them. As director of the Town and Village Aircraft Safety and Noise Abatement Committee of Hempstead, Long Island, he's fighting what he calls the forces of mammon, plus a federal aviation authority, which he charges cares more for the airline industry than it does for the environment.
That's ground control.
People like Tom Henry, who lives at the end of runway 31.
What's it like living under these planes all day long?
Well, I tell you, you can't hear your TV, you get a clatter in the home, quite often they're below 300 feet at night. Right now,
Mrs. Hines, what's it like living under all these jets?
Well, it's at least you can't go to sleep at night. That's out. And the only one at that 4 o'clock in the morning, that's what I get angry about. Talk with that.
Beg pardon?
I said, how can you talk with that?
Mrs. Hines moved here long before the airport was built. Like most major airports in the nation, JFK is now too small for the jet age. All those slashes of light on the radar scope are planes inbound and outbound from JFK and 2 other airports in the neighborhood. JFK alone handles an average of 1,000 aircraft movements a day, and at peak times the big jets land and take off at 40-second intervals. Mr. Deeds says this makes life intolerable for the 250,000 people who live near the airport.
On October 4th, 1958, the Port of New York Authority gave a big interview on the front page of the New York Times. I have photostats of it. Promising the people that they had studied this and that the noise would be no more than the then current prop planes, that the outbound planes would never fly lower than 1,200 feet over inhabited areas, that there would be a restriction on flights. They'd have to go use the outbound, particularly the outbound, over the bay at night, and during the daytime they would not permit them to go over the heavily inhabited areas. All of these restrictions which they had promised. For instance, if they promised a low noise level, and that if a plane was loaded too heavily with passengers, with cargo, with fuel, to keep its noise down to that level, they would just have to discharge some of the passengers, some of the fuel, some of the cargo. This didn't last very long.
We are not bad guys. We're sure trying. We certainly don't want to cripple an industry, and we certainly are sympathetic to the people who have legitimate noise problems. All I can say is we're trying. I've mentioned several of the things that we're trying to do, and I think it's important for the general public to know that almost 20% of our gross national product is involved in forms of transportation, and that it's a known fact that transportation ties in very closely with our economic prosperity.
To be fair, the FAA seems to be listening. At a planning conference in New York recently, they discussed the possibility of a steeper glide angle for incoming aircraft. That would mean planes would approach the airport a good deal higher than they do now. Airport and airlines, it is true, represent billions of dollars worth of investment. But Mr. Deeds' argument is simple. People who live around airports have to be better protected than they are at present. After all, he points out, it is their environment too. Peter Larkin, CBS News, New York.
You are about to witness a happy ending. A principal figure in one of the most scandalous events in Israel's short history is getting married. And by her side, to assure the government's blessing and to give the bride away, is Israel's Prime Minister, Mrs. Golda Meir. The bride is Miss Marcel Nino, who spent 10 years in an Egyptian jail following her conviction as an Israeli spy. She was part of an ill-fated Israeli plot to discredit the Egyptians by blowing up British and American installations in Egypt in 1954. The campaign was a catastrophic failure, and Israel has never gotten over it. 2 of Miss Nino's comrades were executed. One was tortured to death, one committed suicide. David Ben-Gurion, then Prime Minister, had to step down, and the man who allegedly hatched the plot, Defense Minister Pinchas Levon, resigned in disgrace. The affair, bearing Levon's name, was to bring embarrassment and shame to Israel. Much of the scandal was shrouded in secrecy until Miss Nino's wedding. Now, as if to wipe the egg from Israel's face, some of her top leaders are attending the wedding and wishing bride and groom well. Chief of Staff General Chaim Bar-Lev arrives late. But noticeably absent is the guest of honor, Moshe Dayan, who, as Chief of Staff in 1954, was accused of helping to frame Levon. Ben-Gurion, still hale and hearty at 85, is also absent. And obviously unwelcome is Levon himself, a sick and bitter man who has been living for years in the black political shadows of the affair. And so, as the story goes, everybody lived happily ever after. And as long as we are giving you storybook endings, we can say that another chapter in the convulsive Levon affair is closed. Ed Rabel, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
Lenin is supposed to have said once that when he got ready to hang the capitalists, they would sell him the rope. Like most charming utterances credited to statesmen, this one is probably mythical. Still, it perfectly describes the oblivion to prejudice that the prospect of a dollar is certain to produce. Secretary of Commerce Maurice Stans recently set forth with a 10-member expeditionary force whose objective is to increase trade with the Soviet Union. Secretary Stans believes that Soviet-American trade, given a little salesmanship on our side, can amount to $5 billion a year by 1975. He travels with the hopes of the President and the fears of the Defense Department. Until now, the Pentagon has been able to veto any sales to the Soviets of materials that could conceivably improve their capacity to make war. The obvious reason for this new departure is the unhappy condition of our trade balance. We cannot support the Pentagon in the style we have made its habit unless we can find new trading partners. And there are no promising prospects except the Russians and the Chinese. So Mr. Nixon has moved to the logical conclusion: we can't afford our defense against communism unless we can scrape up some cash from the communists. If we can do that, government can go back to being that model of consistently rational behavior its citizens are expected to trust. That is, the Secretary of Defense will frighten Congress with the goblin of the Soviets as our implacable enemy. And the Secretary of Commerce will allure businessmen with the promise of the Soviets as our kindly customer. Each will have made his sale in his way in the great unprejudiced commercial tradition of adjusting the truth to any prejudice the customer may have. And I'm Murray Kempton.
Under their new coach, former Boston Celtics backcourt star Bill Sharman, the Lakers are an exciting running team this season, with the league's leading rebounder, Wilt Chamberlain, triggering the fast break. Second-year man Jim McMillan has taken over one of the forward spots for the retired Elgin Baylor. with veteran Happy Hairston in the other corner. In the backcourt, perennial All-Pro Jerry West, who's not played in a losing game with the Lakers this season. West's partner in the backcourt is the spark plug of the Lakers offense, Gail Goodrich, who, despite being only 6'1", is the team's leading scorer with an average of better than 26 points a game and is fourth in the NBA. I asked the littlest Laker why he's off to such a good start.
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. I think that, first of all, I think the whole club is in shape. I think that, in fact, excellent shape. Coach Sharman put us through a real rugged preseason camp, and I think that that's one of the real big reasons. Me personally, I think, I'm off to a good start. Another reason is because I've lost a lot of weight. I've lost about 10, 12 pounds from last year, and this is, due to the fact of this preseason camp. Also, the fact during the summer I did a lot of running, and this is a game of conditioning, and I think that probably more than anything else, it has been the fact that we have been in excellent condition.
What about Wilt's new role of primarily being a defensive player and not concentrating at all on scoring? How does that affect the balance?
Wilt's been absolutely sensational this year. I don't think that I've ever seen him really take over defensively like he has in his career. I mean, he's blocking everything that's thrown up there. And, of course, that really helps us defensively and helps us, the other individuals, and then we can gamble a little bit more and take a little bit more chances because we know we got him back there.
Once upon a time, before the income tax or Amtrak or the 740 commuter to Penn Station, anybody who was really somebody in this country had his own private railway car. A mansion on wheels that carried the Cabots and the Lowells and Commodore Vanderbilt and the early Rockefellers to all the important places, chugging along from Saratoga Springs to Newport to Palm Beach. When going first class meant something more than not sitting back in economy, highballing through the Carolinas while dining on Washington salmon, French champagne, and baked Alaska. A sort of portable chateau, lavishly appointed with well-upholstered chairs and well-upholstered women. But these days, the private cars are making a comeback. So much so that the D.B. Morgan Rail Car Repair Company is doing a tidy business in San Francisco's Bay Area, putting the old cars back together. A couple of dozen railroad artisans are busy restoring 5 of the old cars, outfitting them with all the latest conveniences, air conditioning and inner spring mattresses. And there's a waiting list twice as long when these are completed, at an average cost of about $50,000 each. The owner of this unique repair shop is a 25-year-old railroad buff, Douglas B. Morgan. You ever get a feeling that you're sort of resurrecting history, putting these things back together?
It's a great feeling, When I was a young boy in San Jose, I dreamed of restoring a private car. I managed to find an old private car, bought it, and I restored it. And it was the greatest feeling to put that certain touch into it that the car had reflected, say, 40 years previous.
Each car has its own claim to fame. This one was built in 1893. It's the oldest private car in this country. Another carried Richard Nixon around the Midwest in 1960. Today's owners don't ride them around as much as in the old days because aside from what it costs just to keep these cars up, the price of a one-way trip to Chicago from the West Coast in one of these things is currently about $3,600. At those prices, it's a lot cheaper just to keep it around as a conversation piece. So Doug Morgan's used railroad cars sit here on a dead-end track, relics of a bygone era when having lots of money was something to be admired, and when having one's own private railway car or two was a one-way ticket into the society pages. It's interesting to note that nowadays the current owners of these cars prefer to remain anonymous. Apparently, being rich isn't nearly as much fun as it used to be. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, Green Bay, California.
The prefect of Paris, not long ago, said that his city had become such a noisy town, there remained only 3 places where one could find peace and quiet. Here in Père Lachaise Cemetery, deep in the heart of the Bois de Boulogne, or inside Notre Dame Cathedral. The noise level is probably no higher than in New York or Tokyo or London. A pneumatic drill has no nationality. But the French government has declared war on excessive decibels all over the country, creating a special anti-noise task force in the Ministry of Environment. In this laboratory, Monsieur Louis Connaught checks out tape recordings of several jackhammers on a decibel chart. At the moment, silencers are recommended but not mandatory. The commander-in-chief of the anti-noise campaign is Monsieur Yves Martin, a man now known to Parisians as Monsieur Silence. Mr. Martin, do you think that the problem of noise, too much noise, is one of the gravest that faces civilized man today? Well, do you think that the average level of noise in Paris is too high? Mr. Silence is very silent indeed. The din of traffic all day long probably gets on more people's nerves than any other city sound, even when you get used to it. But out of the dull roar, there emerges that extra racket from a broken muffler or a bad exhaust. And since the 1st of November, a special motorcycle squad has been cruising Paris to nail offenders. The pinch is made entirely by ear, and the penalty is simple and swift. The driver surrenders the car's registration papers. His next and only stop is to a garage for repairs. Inspection of the repaired vehicles takes place 3 days a month in the Bois de Vincennes over a radar-metered course. Because noisy exhausts are usually smelly as well, the car or truck or motorcycle must also pass a test showing that it's emitting only an acceptable amount of carbon monoxide. Then the vehicle sprints 200 yards past a listening post that records both its speed and the noise it makes. If a car still smokes or rackets too much, it must return to the garage. But if it passes inspection, the driver gets his registration card back, and the sound level in the big town goes down a few decibels. Peter Kalischer, CBS News, Paris.
Following a morning debriefing. "23-year-old stewardess Florence Schaffner thought the middle-aged, business suit-attired man was trying to make a pass at her when he gave her a note declaring his intentions to hijack the jet. The flight captain and 2 officers never saw the man, and after the passengers and 2 other crew members left the plane in Seattle, only stewardess Tina Mucklow remained."
He was not nervous. He seemed rather nice, and other than he wanted certain things to be done, he never tried to harm myself, and although he was impatient a few times, he was never cruel or nasty or impolite to me in any way.
Why did he ask for 4 parachutes? Did he ever mention why that was one of his demands?
No, sir.
Did it seem to you, Miss Mucklow, that he had this thing all very carefully planned out, that he knew exactly what he wanted done? That's the impression we've gotten from the press reports.
I guess he had thought about it. I really don't know.
It was Miss Mucklow who delivered the 4 parachutes and $200,000 extortion money to the hijacker while the plane was refueling in Seattle. She did not see him again after that takeoff.
right after takeoff out of Seattle, he sent me forward, and I said the curtains to be drawn. This is the instructions he had given before, and he said yes, and that's allowed.
When asked if she ever believed the hijacker would blow up the plane, the 22-year-old stewardess replied she really didn't want to find out. While the search continues for the man, security arrangements have been made for Miss Mucklow and another crew member who can identify the hijacker who made the unprecedented parachute escape. This is Jerry Bowen reporting from Minneapolis.
He's been a busy man during the last 2 weeks, his first trip outside Cuba in 7 years. Energetically and enthusiastically, Castro has played basketball, gone scuba diving, and visited farms and huge copper mines. Through it all, Castro has talked. In private and to the masses, Castro has talked, often bitterly denouncing the United States. But suddenly, Castro's tone seems to have tempered.
Por primera vez en 150 años el pueblo americano empieza a tomar conciencia de su papel. Pero el gobierno no representa, a mi juicio, yo digo la verdad, mi opinión, no es un hombre progresista. Todo lo más que pudiera decir que es en cierto sentido realista. Busca reelegirse como presidente. Nixon no representa una filosofía de paz. Lo que ocurre con Nixon es que derrotado en Vietnam la agresión, frente a una toma de conciencia del pueblo americano, trata de manejar eso en favor de sus intereses políticos. Puede ser que gane las elecciones, puede ser incluso que tengamos a Nixon 4 años más. Pero yo no creo que Nixon sea representante de las realidades del mundo de hoy y de la actual toma de conciencia del pueblo americano. Porque su pensamiento nunca fue progresista. Su pensamiento fue guerrerista, fue agresivo, fue reaccionario. Nosotros esperaremos que en Estados Unidos haya un gobierno que represente las realidades, que represente el sentimiento actual de Estados Unidos y la realidad del mundo. Y cuando haya un gobierno que represente la realidad del mundo, respete a nuestros pueblos, respete a América Latina, renuncie a su política de intervención y renuncie a su papel de gendarme, entonces nosotros hablaremos con ese gobierno de Estados Unidos.
Irónico, porque eso es justamente lo que se acusa a usted de intervención, ¿no?
Sí, pero ¿no le parece muy irónico que nos acusen de intervención a nosotros que estuvimos intervenidos durante 10 años? ¿No le parece irónico que acusen de intervención a Cuba cuando le enviaron cientos de desembarcos clandestinos, cientos de desembarcos de armas? ¿No le parece irónico que acusen de intervención a un país que sufrió la agresión de la bahía de Cochino? Yo creo que el pueblo americano tiene un gran idealismo. Precisamente por ese idealismo lo han engañado. Lo han llevado a guerras injustas en nombre de la justicia, en nombre de la libertad. Pero el pueblo americano es un pueblo de gran idealismo, de grandes reservas morales. Y nosotros creemos que esas cosas que tenemos en común, usted y nosotros, serán los fundamentos de la amistad, de la verdadera fraternidad entre los pueblos del norte y los pueblos del sur.
Three reporters were permitted into the institution. The inmates would release one hostage. After the release of that hostage, the reporters would enter the seized area and accept a list of demands from the prisoners. Once the demands had been turned over, the prisoners would release the remaining hostages.
3 reporters, 2 from the wire services and 1 from a local paper, went in through the prison gates. Later, Carl Zeitz of the Associated Press spoke for the 3.
We were brought into the rotunda, which is a circular area separating the 2 cell blocks involved. The inmates in wing 4, which is over here, had all the hostages. From behind prison bars, they saw us at about a distance of 40 feet, and they released the first hostage, Mr. Iorio. At that point, they were supposed to release the others and then in turn be given access to us, but that fell through. There was a great deal of shouting. There was a great deal of get the pigs out, get the sticks out. They were talking about about 20 policemen who had been brought into the area with nightclubs. The police were pushed back. However, there was a great commotion. There was a lot of sounds of breaking of furniture, etc. and we couldn't quite tell what was happening, but we were taken back out. I'm not sure exactly how long it was, perhaps about 30 minutes more, and we were taken back in. There was still 25 minutes, a great deal of argument going on in there, that we could see a fire going on behind them, and I guess what is a room in that cell block, and but the hostages were released, and at that point we were given access to the prison.
The ambulances, waiting for the hostages, quickly took their charges, sirens wailing, to the hospital. And Governor Cahill, relief softening the lines of fatigue on his face, called a hurried news conference.
I think everything is under control. The hostages, as you know, have been freed, all of them, and there are some injuries, but nobody's seriously injured, we hope.
The hostages were out, but the negotiations between inmates and the official committee continued through the long, cold night. It was not until dawn approached that Archibald Alexander of the negotiating committee, wind-whipped and tired, paused at the gates and talked.
The inmates are back in their cells. Some of them are sleeping. They're being fed right now. And every commitment that the administration made has been kept.
Which is to say what, sir?
Well, there were three major commitments. One was that there would be no corporal punishment, no corporal reprisals against the inmates. Another one was that either inmate or so-called community representatives would follow the officers as they guided the inmates back to their cells. And the last one, which we've been talking about a lot in there now, was that the administration is going to meet with the inmates to discuss every one of their grievances.
Three of the hostages remained in the hospital. Of the three sent home, one, Kenneth Koetsier, with his sister and girlfriend, passed near us. The concern of those who had waited was demonstrated by the closeness of the protective shield they placed around him.
Why don't you leave him alone?
The closing of the car door was like the opening of the gates of relief. Unashamedly, tears could flow. The rebellion was over. No lives had been lost, and injuries were relatively slight. The fear of another Attica was not realized, and there were those bold enough to ask.
Governor, all day people have been comparing the possibilities of this one to what happened at Attica. Did you ever make that comparison in your mind?
No, as I've tried to say, each event has to stand on its own. Each has to be judged, the circumstances, individual circumstances.
The cleanup is underway, the negotiations continue, in the hopes of creating something both inmate and system can live with. This is Chris Morgan reporting.
Kevin Healy, age 21, a part-time laborer of no regular address, is one of Britain's 2,600 registered drug addicts. He's on his way to the local pharmacy to pick up his daily dose of heroin, paid for in full by Her Majesty's government. Until 3.5 years ago, Healy could have obtained his prescription from any private doctor in Britain. Today, though, the system is different. The only place addicts can go for legal heroin now is to one of the 14 drug dependence clinics, like this one in London. The government launched the clinic program after an alarming 10-fold increase in the number of heroin addicts in 5 years, created by a few unscrupulous doctors who were overprescribing narcotics. Most addicts condemn the new system because doctors at the clinics keep cutting down their doses, trying to cure them.
I'm going to add some 1 ml of sterile water, so that makes 2 mils of injection.
They say they are forced to supplement their rations with illegal heroin from the black market. When they're not out on the street, hustling money to buy dope, some addicts, like these, hang around a neighborhood charity house called New Horizons.
How easy is it to get dope illegally?
I suppose I can walk out of here and walk back in
15 minutes time with a few packets on, you know. It's easy, in other words, if you've got the money.
Is it cheap?
It's reasonably cheap.
London's black market in drugs operates here on Gerrard Street, a few blocks from Piccadilly Circus. Chinese merchants smuggle heroin from Hong Kong, dilute it, and sell it cheaply on the street. The availability of free heroin and the cheap cost of illegal drugs may explain the fact that addicts are not a major crime problem in Britain. Here at Piccadilly, where addicts congregate, there is evidence of purse snatching, petty thievery, and prostitution, but rarely crimes of violence. If an addict steals or deals in drugs to supplement his legal habit, he doesn't have to steal very much. This year, for the first time in a decade, the government reported a small decrease in the number of known addicts. The people you don't see at Piccadilly represent a significant proportion of addicts, perhaps 1/4, who lead fairly normal lives, holding steady jobs and raising families. Alex Trocchi, a writer, has been a heroin addict for 20 years without becoming a social outcast.
In England, if presently one is allowed to register and attend a clinic, one is given a ration of heroin with which one must make do, and if one can make do with this ration, then one can, other things being equal, live a moderate and ordinary life, being a heroin addict, but also a postman or whatever it is one is. This makes a tremendous difference. There's the psychological pressures that exist in the United States and which makes of every junkie a public enemy just don't pertain in England.
John Snow, the co-director of New Horizons, is a social worker trying to help addicts. Does he believe the British narcotic system is working?
It depends what you mean by working. In terms of curing already addicted people, I would say definitely not. In terms of stemming the spread of hard narcotic addiction, I would say it has had some success. And in terms of keeping big business, mafia-type elements out of the British drug scene, it has been relatively successful. In providing a definite source of drugs, it has reduced the effectiveness of the black market.
Kevin Healy has put the heroin he got at the pharmacy into a hypodermic needle and is trying to give himself a fix. After 6 years of poking needles into his body, Healy cannot find a vein easily. Like other longtime addicts, his blood vessels have collapsed. Shooting up has become a painful, frustrating ritual. Yet Britain's program of licensed narcotics has made life more tolerable for people like Kevin Healy. As wretched as he may be, he is not in constant fear of the police or worried about where his next fix is coming from. Here, he is treated as a troubled individual rather than a troublemaker. John Lawrence, CBS News, London.
Countless facts have shown that what the Soviet leadership is practicing is certainly not socialism, but as Lenin put it, socialism in words, imperialism in deeds. That is, social imperialism. A simple but important principle of Marxism-Leninism is that one must judge a person not merely by his words, but by his deeds.
We study both deeds and words because your deeds and your words do correspond. You are against the Soviet proposal to convene a world disarmament conference. A proposal that has been supported by the overwhelming majority of the conference. This is Marxism in action and Chinese interpretation of Marxism. As far as the libelous statement is concerned,
An artist interested in still life would continue to find New York Harbor a compelling subject. Most of the ships are quiet, and at anchor, most of the longshoremen remain at home. Nearly 70 ships have been harbor-bound during the strike, looking something like a child's flotilla becalmed in a bathtub. Decks as well as docks loaded with all sorts of cargo. According to most union and company spokesmen, the court order came too late on Friday to get everyone back to work by today. And the New York Waterfront Commission does not expect business as usual till Tuesday. Out of 20,000 New York longshoremen, fewer than 350 men were on the job today, some loading and unloading a ship that resembled a floating truck terminal. The ship had been in port since the strike's beginning 57 days ago. Luxury liners have come and gone during the strike. Again today, the luxury of the liner gave way to despair on the dock, most passengers lugging their own luggage. And the only good thing about that, we suppose, is that you don't have to tip anyone. Morton Dean, CBS News, New York.
For old Bostonians, the twilight of Braves Field is burned away by the glow of memory of a baseball team which waved goodbye 2 decades ago. For young Bostonians, this is another street corner, and the Braves are a hockey team which swaggered into town this fall.
The American Hockey League, top of the minors, put the team in Boston Garden cheek by jowl with their big brothers, the National Hockey League Bruins, a sold-out club whose season tickets seem to have been unavailable since Ralph Waldo Emerson got the last pair for his friend James Russell Lowell. The overflow of hockey-hungry Bostonians stunned and delighted the Bruin Braves management by gobbling up the new team's tickets at a rate which puts its attendance ahead of the local successful big league basketball team, the Celtics.
We thought that if we did get away to a real good start, that the fans would come out because knowing that this section being the great hockey center that it is, and so many people having to be turned away to get into the Bruins, that we knew that they would come out for the Braves, providing, of course, that they had a decent record.
The success of the expansion Braves, surprise early league leaders, has brought crowds to Boston Garden's hockey shop, where amid the Larrys and Panatis of the Bruins and the special superstar items, there is a generous sprinkling of buttons, banners, and shirts, identifying the buyer with the lads on the farm. Coach Bep Gwidolin is delighted with the fan response.
I just think this is great with their fan club. You see the signs up there, and the guys take a little peek, you know, and they think it's just something else, and they like it. And as a matter of fact, Bobby Stewart had a birthday cake given to him by 4 little wonderful girls who just thought they're going to be all tickled tonight when they're going to talk to him. I'm going to make arrangements for them to talk to Bobby for a couple of minutes.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
They come in at 6:30, and they're just lined right up here. You'll see them tonight. And as we go out, you'll hear them screaming and hollering, you know, for the little idols.
As the players march to the ice, it is hard to remember that they are minor leaguers in a big league town, as the fans touch armor and shout encouragement as if King Arthur's varsity knights were taking the field at Camelot. Cake recipient Bob Stewart has, in fact, already joined the Bruin Round Table. Season ticket sales were cut off at about half of the arena's 14,000-seat capacity, lest the Braves become, like the Bruins, another of Boston's exclusive clubs for which one must be put up at birth. The top price of $4, as opposed to the big team's $7 figure, may explain the youthful look of the crowd, and there is the fervency and immediacy of young loyalty in the signs which circle the ice.
Do you come to these games because you can't get in the Bruin games or because you like this team better?
Can't get into the Bruin games.
I enjoy hockey, and I enjoy the opportunity to be able to come regularly.
Are you a thwarted Bruins fan or a real Braves fan?
I'm a Braves fan.
Why? Because they're young?
Yes, partly.
From a standing start, this group of tomorrow's prospects are out averaging last year's figures for 4 National League hockey teams: Pittsburgh, California, Buffalo, and Los Angeles in attendance. And their destructive path through their league suggests that they might beat some of those big clubs on the ice. What they may lack in finesse is excused by their followers because of the zest with which they bounced the enemy off the boards. And the goals that beat the Providence Reds aroused cheers that suggested the Stanley Cup was at stake. Just what is the constituency of this JV attraction is the subject of an extensive study by graduate students at the University of Massachusetts.
Excuse me, folks. We're taking a survey to try and find out what sort of people come to American Hockey League games.
What has surprised you so far about what you found?
Gee, that there's the attendance that there is for the game right off the bat. It's just amazing that there's this many people that support hockey in the Boston area.
So far, the crowds are averaging over 11,000 per game, and the SRO sign is becoming commonplace. As the Braves perform on the stage where the high drama of the National Hockey League has in recent years centered, one can only wonder if a still younger, greener team added to the schedule would bring its own crowd out of the children's movie matinees. This is Haywood Hale Brune in Boston.